Sure. From the time that I was quite a young lad, I always knew that I wanted to have a business of some sort, and running any kind of business was not going to be okay. I wanted to do something that was going to be of great value over time in some way, but something that was real and a meaningful deal. So considered a lot of different kinds of things, especially in the service side of the business. I was very young and had access to no resources whatsoever. But it was also the early 80s, and this computer thing was just looking like it might have a little bit of legs. So not knowing anything about it, simply started to immerse myself in the hobby shops and the stores and the outlets that were just beginning to pop up on boulevards across Southern California. And I would simply go, I'm in there and say, hi, I just want to sort of learn. So most people would throw me out. A few people didn't. And I'd help to unload trucks or stock shelves, and eventually came up with some concepts that turned into Belkin as we know it today. I think businesses get launched in a million different ways, but two of the most common flavors are either you'd have a real formal plan and you go through some type of a formal process, typically more than one person involved in some way, and you're funded through some means, either right away or pretty early. And getting that funding and keeping that funding vehicle going to sustain the cash flow for the business consumes a lot of time, a lot of attention, but it just comes with this more formal model. And the other model is folks like me who come to the conclusion that no matter how hard that we were to work in trying to get access to capital, none was going to be forthcoming. And the time and energy that it would take to get people to believe adequately to fund us, we'd be better off just starting to make things happen. So as we were spending time in these stores up and down the streets of Southern California, it became very clear to us that folks there were very focused on selling the box, selling the computer itself, or maybe the printer, maybe a software package. But the people coming into these outlets were looking for a solution. They had a need, something that they wanted to solve. And getting this box was of very little value to them. And some simple questions would come up like, well, it's great that I have this computer. It's great that I have this printer. I actually need the thing to print the work that I'm going to do. How is it that that happens? Well, you need a printer cable. Great. Can I get one? Sure. And they would either literally, in some cases, go back and make one, or they'd rummage around to try to find one, or they would refer them down to Radio Shack. So it became very clear that this was something that we might be able to add a little bit of value in to kind of provide some of the pieces to create an actual solution cell, and didn't require a lot of capital. So would literally run around during the day selling the stuff and trying to get orders, and then would build the products at night, and then following day or days then would deliver that and book more orders. So expenses were virtually non-existent. It was in my parents' garage, and making stuff at night and selling and delivering it during the day without a lot of thought about things some of the times. For instance, the first time that we built the stuff and brought it, I said, great, we will take them. How much do you want for them? And sort of go, we haven't really thought about that. What do you usually pay for them? And we were off and running. I don't have any formal education whatsoever. Well, I probably shouldn't say any. I briefly attended UCLA. I went there out of high school in the late 70s, but my heart was never really into it. What it is that I wanted to do was to build this business. And I remember coming out of one of my classes there, and I was a freshman, of course, and talking to another student, and he happened to be a senior, and it was his last quarter. And I go, wow, what a great spot to be in. You've accomplished all this, it's done, you're ready to launch off and to make things happen. He goes, are you kidding me? You're the one that is in good shape. I'd love to have the prospect of 4 years of being able to go to school. And so nothing wrong with either perspective or answer, right? But I was dying to get out to make things happen. So nothing formal from a marketing side, an engineering side, a tech side, any side. My work experience up to that time had been working with kids that were at day camp at the YMCA. I grew up in the Y. I'm still very, very active with the Y and other nonprofit organizations. And then working with at-risk kids in South Central LA. And then worked part-time for a private for-profit organization that made connectors for electronics. So I got a little bit of exposure there. But I've always been a tinkerer. I'd take a radio and tear it apart and build it back up. And my dad had a good aptitude for that sort of thing as well. So I'm inclined toward that area, but little or no formal education whatsoever. And that would hold true for accounting, finance, anything, everything. I'm not that smart. I know a lot of smart people and spend time with a lot of smart folks, and I'm okay. But the number one quality going for me that I've utilized most often is just a tenaciousness that is off the chart. So I vowed as a kid, for some reasons that I experienced in my household, that I was going to make some things happen. And one of the things that I vowed was that I was going to build a significant business. And I wanted to make that happen from that day forward. And I knew it wasn't going to be easy. And I would have some really crazy thoughts. I mean, I knew that I didn't have money and that I didn't have access to it. And I seriously thought about things like, if I have to, I'm going to live on the side of the freeway, just to have no expenses whatsoever. That's what it may take to kind of make this happen. Of course, I didn't have to take things that far, but I did live at them home. But it was just a spirit and an absolute belief that no matter what, this was going to happen. And we were off and running. I think it varies. I think for some, they've got insight into how the world's going to evolve and how people are likely to live and how they want to live, and can truly see around corners, and truly are creative and brilliant enough to kind of match what that need and that opportunity is going to be to their sort of skill set. A really good example of that is somebody like a Steve Jobs. There are other people that can really see the future about just what's going to happen in the market and what's going to be key to making those kinds of things happen. So it could be someone like figuring out that the gaming is going to be a big business, and so they're really going to invest in this, Vegas area. And I think Bill Gates is a really good sampling of a person that does that. Those are not the primary strengths or qualities for me. Mine is spending some time figuring out elements of those things, not as well as those folks or many others, but once a decision's made about what's going to happen, nothing's going to stop us, and we just will not quit. And I think that element's a common one too, but I think it varies. There's no one winning strength or asset base that's the right answer or the only answer. It's more understanding about what makes you tick and then playing to that and how that's going to be applied to what it is that you want to do. The concept in the beginning was just about scaling, creating an organization that would be able to scale to an enduring great enterprise over time. And from that concept, it didn't really matter if it was in the tech space or the food space or consumer product space or what have you. And then the next step was saying, hey, there's likely to be a lot of opportunity and a lot of growth in this computer space. And the key for looking for things that are emerging and where there's going to be a lot of growth is that it allows you to make a lot of errors. You can do things that grow more slowly or are more mature, and there's a lot of great people that have made great things happen in that space. Coffee's been around for a long time. None of us would argue about the commercial success, at least of an organization like Starbucks. But it's my belief that if you're in an emerging sort of category, you can make a lot more errors, just because the market's going to help to kind of lift and propel you along. There's a flip side of that, though, as well. It's not a secret that those kinds of things are very attractive, and it tends to have a lot of other people kind of come to the space, so it gets crowded early. So Belkin knew that it had to set itself apart, and the way that we did that couldn't be through scale, so it had to be throughout servicing the other folks that were out there. So we would take orders and do whatever it took to get that product to ship same or next day. There was more than one night when it was literally me up the entire evening through until the next day to get this stuff built so that it could ship next day. And then we came up with a concept, and the computer marketplace is very different then compared to how it is now. Then it was a very fragmented market. A lot of people that have been forgotten about that were leaders and visionaries in this space. You had computers from Texas Instruments, from Commodore, there was this thing called the Osborne, there was Columbia PCs, and the president of IBM was saying, I see no need for every household, I don't even see a need for every business to have a computer. So there was plenty of people that were in the space, and it was really hard to just sort of, get it. So the way that we set ourselves apart, and everybody chose a different connector for their printer interface. Nothing was the same. So you had to figure out the wiring and which wire had to go to which pin for this equipment to work. And then you had all these different sorts of printers. So you couldn't just go and just get a printer cable. There was all different kinds, and who knew what kind of PC that you were going to be trying to hook up to what kind of other device. So we said, hey, if you've got an application for any two things, we'll build that cable for you, and on one set price. I don't remember what it was, probably in the $14 to $24 range or so, and we'll ship that to you next day. So we would get those requests to figure out how to build that cable. Might cost us $50. So we'd really take a loss on that, but we would have the opportunity to more likely build an account for life, and it started to build our database. So the more we did it, the easier it got, and the more sophisticated that we got, as people would call in and say, hey, I need a cable that's going to go from my Osborne luggable to this Star printer. And we go, no sweat. We notice this is the fourth or fifth custom cable we built for you in the last month. Can we have a crack at just your regular business? And typically they would say, sure. If they said no and they kept saying no, then it became harder and harder for us to get that custom cable shipped to those guys. And there's a lot of discussion now about how you manage your accounts that are not profitable for you, and how you fire those accounts. And we wouldn't have been able to frame it in that sort of dialogue at the time, but the ability to create these kind of service differentiation tools that had people calling us, and then the opportunity to get their entire scheme of business that made sense for us, and to weed out the folks that just weren't going to do that, was really key to our success in the early days. And then we applied that same model to cable assemblies and connectivity equipment, and then we went into power, and then, over the last 25 years now, we're very big into the consumer electronics space, and MP3 players, and the iPod, and networking gear, and the ecosystem around laptops. And things have evolved many times in a real significant way, but that same genesis, that same essence of understanding what's happening and what's going to happen in the marketplace, and marrying, aligning, accumulating kind of talents, resources, competencies in the organization, and getting that to make a good fit for what we thought the market was going to need, has been our non-secret to success for 25 years. Yeah, your point's a really good one, and our philosophy inside of Belkin is you're continually changing and continually evolving, or you are very rapidly going out of business. We live in a very dynamic, rapidly changing world. And you have to be sensitive to how you define who it is you are and what it is you want to achieve, to be sensitive to the amount of change that's taking place in real time and is going to keep occurring, and the acceleration of that change is probably going to increase as well. So it has not only to do with, hey, you're making products that happen to be made of copper with some plastic that's over the top of it now. Don't think about it that way. What it is that you're doing is enabling somebody using some type of a tool and wanting a complete solution set to a larger ecosystem. So we wouldn't define it as our copper cable assemblies. We very rapidly define that as connectivity. And then we're very agnostic. We don't care if it's copper. We don't care if it's aluminum. We don't care if it's fiber optics. We don't care if it's inductive. We don't care if it's RF wireless. We don't care if it's proprietary. We don't care if it's Bluetooth. We don't care. We don't care. What it is we care about is how people want to live and how they want to do things. The thing that made PCs take off early wasn't the fact that the PC box was there. It was that spreadsheet software was invented. And you're probably too young to know, but I remember vividly having to do a financial model, and it's not the way that we do it today. We then had to do all of the math, and then if you change the assumption, okay, it's not an 8% growth rate, you don't want a 4% IRR, you would have to do all that math every single time. It's not the way we do it now. It's sort of hard to imagine, but the spreadsheet software productivity tool and really fueled this sort of growth. So how does that relate to connectivity? How does that relate to a power product? Well, people don't want to work this hard on that data and lose it. So you want to make sure that that data is protected, which sort of led to our leadership in the surge protector space. It wasn't about saying, what's sort of something else that we can throw on a shelf. What are people sort of concerned about? So the same thing happened with word processing software, and the same thing happened with desktop publishing. These were really huge demands with how people wanted to live and how they wanted to work, which drove all of these other elements in the marketplace. So you have to be sensitive to how these things are going to change and going to evolve. Know that you're not going to get that right, but 10% of the time or less. So how are you in it enough when what's going to take off starts to take off, where you're able to very, very rapidly lead, but not so immersed in it that you get blinded to what's taken place. If we go back 20 years, it's very hard to have known then whether this media called Sony Beta or VHS was going to take off as the media for video. And VHS killed Beta. But if you got over celebratory with VHS, you missed the fact that it was going to have a relatively short run. It was going to be DVD. If you get too immersed in DVD, you're not thinking about what might happen with Blu-ray. So you had better be really good at knowing that things are going to evolve and change, and build an organization and a mindset that not only adapts to it, but as soon as it becomes clear what's going to sort of start to take place, where you're able to lead it. Because if you're not leading it, you're also going to be out of business, in our opinion. The work that is required to get something launched is indeed very different to scaling a $1 billion a year enterprise. And the skills that are necessary can really vary from my perspective. What is critical is a different type of look at this. And what that look would be, what do you love to do? What do you love to do? What do you want to see happen for you? Then, how do I get paid to do that? That's the next question. Or if it's bigger than that, like building a business, how do I wrap a business around that? And what it is that I love to do, I love working with people. And I love interfacing with folks. I love learning about what sort of turns them on, how it is they want to live, how it is they want to work. And I love working with people that are trying to figure out how best to sort of address that for other folks. Very different from somebody that's very into process and could take process and planning and really get a business all wrapped around that. We all need each of these other elements, but you need to figure out what you love to do, what you're really, really good at, build things around that, know what it is you're not very good at, and then figure out of those things what it is you need, and make sure that you get those backfilled in a very effective fashion. For me, all about people. It's people first. Well, you got to figure out what it is you want to achieve. That you have to know. Next thing is right people first, and then get the people aligned with what it is you need to have happen, and then you need to set an expectation for everything, and you need to very brutally, honestly assess how well that you're doing versus what it is you set out to achieve. And if it's not working, it's okay, but it's not okay then to sit. You got to get moving and get things acting so that you're doing the results that you set out to achieve. The biggest challenge early was the obstacle to be credible and to be taken seriously by people that I was trying to get to come to work for us, for people that we were trying to get to buy from us, and in many cases from people that we were even trying to get to sell their stuff to us. Early was really tough, building enough credibility and trust with people for them to believe adequately, to invest enough with us, not money, just time, energy, commitment, to make things happen. By far the biggest challenge, second half, so say over the last 15 years or so, would be getting to the truth. Because first, there's no credibility whatsoever, and then you reach a certain size and a certain scale where there's a brand, and the person leading the organization has got a title. And the communication starts to get edited at a rapid rate. And if you're not close enough to what's going on, where you're getting to the truth, very hard to be successful. You can be smart enough, you can be experienced enough, you can be educated enough, you can be analytical enough, you can be resourceful, you can be thoughtful, you can be wise. But if you're dealing with the wrong fact base, or you're not dealing with the facts, very, very hard. And people find it very hard to communicate up in an unedited, truthful fashion. So getting to the truth. To me, it's more important to lead than it is to manage, and you do have to do both. And I'm fortunate in that leadership for me comes in a pretty natural way. I enjoy leading other people, and I think that I lead in a relatively effective way. And part of what really helps me is that I'm very fact-based, very straightforward. You can not like what it is that I have to say, but at least you're going to know that it's coming from my heart and that I mean it and that I believe it. And I typically can earn credibility and trust from folks relatively quickly. And I would not say this, but I have heard others say that people will walk to the end of the earth to make things happen, that there's that kind of a bonding that takes place. So for me, it's leveraging myself and ourselves as a collective group on the shared belief and common vision that we have to make things happen, and playing my part as a servant leader in many ways, helping to kind of lead the organization that way. I don't think that that's the only way to make things happen. I think the key thing is to play to the strength that you have. In my particular case, that's my strength, and that's what I would want to make sure that I leverage off of. For other folks, very good technical managers. So really good about clarity on what the end goal is, process and formal communication of what that goal is, a lot of steps and process and metrics. There's nothing wrong with that. There's everything right about it. It's not what I'm the best at, so that needs to get backfilled through other folks. And then to the extent that you have everything, so much the better. So I think the key is having a recognition of all the things that sort of need to be done, an acute awareness of what you're good at, play into that, play into it, and then making sure you get the other elements backfilled. Yeah, so there's a lot of areas that I'm not that good at. I'm not good at time management. It doesn't come in a natural way for me. The current president of Belkin, a gentleman by the name of Mark Reynoso, is over the top great with it. And it makes him a lot more effective than me in many ways. It makes him a lot more effective than what he would be if he didn't have it. I'm aware of it and I'm okay with it. You know, I've done some things to sort of force myself to be better at it from time to time, but I like being able to sort of focus on what it is that I want to when I want to, and then going on to a different thing. So you could argue correctly that it makes me less efficient. I recognize it my himself. but I need to be true enough to myself and to my style to make what it is that I want to do happen for me and for me to love what it is that I do. And if I were to sacrifice the one for the other, I would not be effective at them all. So plenty of things that I'm not good at, but you can get them backfilled with other folks. And if you can't do that, then you have to adjust. You got to do what you got to do, but you got to be true to yourself too. Otherwise, it's not fun, and you're just not going to be good at it. Absolutely, it's values. So you need to understand and to be aware and to identify what matters to you and what the values are for the organization. And you have to be true to those values. And then you need to understand what it is you want to achieve and where it is you are. So you're at point A, you want to get to point B. You'll do anything that it takes within this value structure, and you're off and running. So our secrets are not such a secret, and it absolutely is being aware of what's going on with your prototypical account, generally speaking, and what's taking place with that customer specifically. So you've got to know your market, you've got to know your customer generally speaking, and you've got to know her or him specifically as well. So for us in the early days, that meant me spending a lot of time in stores, watching people buy products that were ours, that competed with ours, and products that weren't even in our business. And I drove people crazy because I would stand in a store, they'd be shopping, and then I would come up and say, hi, I'm Chet Pipkin, I am president of this company called Belkin, and you just didn't buy this product, or you just did, or you bought this toy, and I saw you look at the package, and I saw you do this, and then a lot of people go, whoa, they're gone, right? And other people just tell you whatever just to get out of that spot. But in many cases, you really get some terrific insights. Now, you can do that if that's what you have to do, but it doesn't scale well for $1 billion enterprise. So you need to evolve that into a different way of sort of doing things. But it's Belkin's biggest area of investment and focus. And we now refer to that as market reflection. But it's understanding markets and building engines inside of the company that are collectors of this market insight that bring it into the organization. Then we talk about, what does this sort of mean? And then we say, what does this sort of mean for us? So we talked about these productivity tools that really drove the sales of PCs for a while. And we refer to that as a 6-inch experience, right? Now, the deployment of computers and technology is largely what it is that we refer to as a 6-foot experience, where we're sitting back like this. We're watching content, and it's video, it's music, it's much, much more of an experience set experience. And things are evolving in real time again to one where it's very, very much a social experience, right? It's very, very much what MySpace and Facebook is all about. So that has to do with creating a lot of content now and then sharing it and doing that in a continuous basis. So the key is to understand, again, what's sort of taken place. Once you know that, you've got a much better chance of figuring out how to provide a product or an experience or a service to people. And I'll tell you right now, the number one irritation for people with technology stuff It's not very robust. It's hard to install and it doesn't work way too often. If our cars worked as poorly as our computers did, you know, if you had to press Alt, Control, Delete, or the car wouldn't run, you know, we wouldn't tolerate it. We wouldn't tolerate a landline phone that works like the cell phone. You know, I'm talking away, blah, 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 the call's lost. What? You know, you'd be all over the telephone company. And we accept some things on the tech space, but if you play to that acceptance as an organization, you're done from a customer service side. You have to understand what people really are aspiring to do and aspiring to be. And you got to listen and you got to act. And you can't do it through a department. You can't do it through a quality control department. You can't do it through a customer service department. Whole organization's got to understand the markets that we serve, that you serve, what's happening in those markets, and the culture of the organization needs to be, I understand what this person's talking about on the other end of the phone. I get it. And therefore I get what they need. I'm going to give them what it is they need. And I'm going to communicate back into this organization where we're falling short so that organizationally we can deliver what it is we need. We're nowhere near, inside of Belkin, nowhere near where it is that we need to be. But we truly aspire to be what it is that we've defined. So we'll get there. And there's a story about the two folks that are getting chased by the bear. You don't need to be faster than the bear. You just need to be faster than the other guy. But if you train to be faster than the bear, maybe you'll be faster than the other guy. So when it comes to that, aspire to be the best, to outrun the bear, but you really only have to outrun the other guy. It was that credibility theme. So we're willing to put our money where our mouth was. And as the brand scales, frankly, the pressure to be able to do that is less because we're able to deliver in other areas. But it was really key to some of our success in the early days of the company. We talked a little bit earlier about values for the organization. So people need to figure out what their own value tables are and again, be aware and have them visible and treat them in a very serious way. And Belkin is going through a strategic planning process. And I can say that with confidence because we're going through one on a continuous basis. That never stops for us. It's not an event, it's a process that takes place. We spend about half the time on values and half the times on strat business planning. And as we went through our last values refresh, it was raised by a member of our executive team, hey, this issue of sustainability is not on here as one of our key value areas. So it kicked off a lot of discussion, a lot of reflection, a lot of soul searching, and it's now one of the key Belkin values. It is tough to sort of go through these assessments because as we started to do our self-assessment, we're nowhere where it is we want to be or feel that we need to be with issues of being a lot more socially green, conscious organization, and we want to be. It's truly something that we want to do. So we would not give ourselves very high grades in terms of what it is that we're achieving or accomplishing today. There's a lot that we want to do. And we're not very expert at it. So this is a key area where this is a very emerging thought. There's no doubt in my mind that whether we were committed to it or not, the market's going to demand it from everybody. So we're fortunate that it's something that we believe in any ways, and it's something that we're going to have to get figured out. And there's not a lot of people with a lot of experience doing it well. If we assess our packaging, our development, our energy utilization in the workplace, what it is that we do to promote it with our people, our customers, our suppliers, or our other stakeholders, even when they're not actively involved with a Belkin sort of thought or activity, we weren't doing nearly as much as what it is that we wanted to or hoped. So we've done a lot already over the last 8 months. I think our consumption of non-green energy is, down in a real dramatic way, and changes in the packaging. But there are things that would be pretty obvious even to an unsophisticated dope like me. And consistent with our philosophical approach of people first and then make things happen, we're going to need people. We need people that are very aware and are very expert in this area for us. And I think it's going to be true for about 1 million other companies around the globe as well. So this is really, really exciting space. Exciting because it's really meaningful to the world. Exciting because it's an emerging thing. It qualifies as one of those areas, right, where there's very little being done relative to what it's going to look like 20 years from now. So some real opportunities to lead. There's going to be all kinds of growth and expansion into this space, and it's not going to be me or people like me that do that. It's going to be people that are at a point in their career where they're getting ready to take their next leap and have their impact and their mark on their organizations and their marketplaces and the world. It's a very, very exciting time for all of us to benefit from it. It's a very exciting time for future generations that this upcoming generation is getting this figured out at such a rapid rate. And I think it's a very exciting time for you because you're going to play a real leadership role in making all of this happen. We've got businesses and offices all around the world. We started in the United States, and I would hope that the United States is our smallest of 3 key markets over time. Our biggest market should be Asia Pacific. Our second biggest should be Europe, and our third biggest should be the Americas. And we should do that by growing the Americas business as rapidly as the market in the Americas. I'm talking about all the Americas, not just the U.S. Growing that as rapidly as we can, but growing Europe at a much more rapid rate, and growing Asia Pacific at a rate much, much faster than that. And we're well on our way. When we started, of course, 100% of our business was in the U.S. Now about 60% or so is. And the first big benchmark we set for ourselves was for less than half of our total business to be out of the U.S. market. So Belkin's been fortunate. Our philosophical, our strategic, our cultural way of approaching things has been very well aligned for what's needed to create and grow a global and international organization. It's that theme that you might have heard me talk about that has to do with understanding your markets. And as you do that, things are very, very different in Hong Kong than what it is that they're like in Dubai. Very, very different in the Netherlands than the way things are in Japan. Japan's very into efficient, minimalist, things that work really well in a very elegant way, with nothing that is ostentatious about them whatsoever. And so to know that, you need to be there. And you need to know people that grew up there and live there and are from there. And they need to be influencing the way that we go to business in Japan, and also provide an added asset to us where we're able to take elements of that and apply that to other markets around the world as well. And inside of Belkin, we call this our kimchi approach. And many of you may know that kimchi is like a pickled cabbage that is a favorite for many who enjoy Korean cuisine, but it can put off a little bit of an odor. And LG, a great Korean enterprise themselves, was discovering that they were selling a lot more refrigerators and grabbing a lot more market share outside of their home Korean market than they were at home. So that puzzled them a little bit, and they spent a little bit of time researching what it was that they were up to. And the people that they were competing with in their own market in Korea had a kimchi department in the refrigerator, and LG didn't. And consumers preferred, they wanted their kimchi, but they wanted the kimchi odor to stay with kimchi. And so LG got that figured out, and of course now LG refrigerators have got a kimchi department, or compartment rather. It's the way that we remind ourselves all the time that you have to be very, very sensitive to the local market. And you do that, it's always people. And I hope that I'm not boring with that theme, but it's always people. So it's people that grew up there, that live there, that work there, that do their experiences there. And you have to be sensitive to it, you have to be inclusive, and you need an organization and a culture that embraces. Things are so different all around the world. It's not a bad thing, it's not a scary thing, it's an exciting thing, it's an enabling thing. Like it or not, it's the way that things are, and we're fortunate, as we do like it, we love it. We think that diversity is great. It's what makes the world great. Belkin's a very diverse place to work, and we think it's one of the key elements that makes us great. And when you've got connection to that, you're able to listen, learn. If you've built an engine inside the organization that can then filter on that, act on it, and deliver solutions, experiences, and products back to the marketplace that are based on what people do and how they live and how they want to do things, you can make a lot of errors and still be really successful. Yeah, so we're more common than we are different in any particular office around the world, and it's my vision that any Belkin employee that works anywhere in the world could be immediately transferred or moved or visit any other Belkin location, any place in the world, and the way in which they would work and be able to access their data and communicate to their co-workers and that type of thing would be exactly the same. So, and that the values of Belkin would be completely the same. So there's more consistency and commonality that there's not. And one of the things that would be very consistent, very common, is that people in any given marketplace would be sensitive to what's going on in that market. So from that regard, if you were looking at it through that lens, things are different in every office, but different only to the extent that those markets are different. How Belkin is reflecting what's going on in that market and what it is that we're doing about it would be exactly the same. Well, that would be our aspiration, that things are exactly the same at any Belkin around the world. What I love to do most is to have interaction with people in a more intimate sort of setting. Intimate meaning just with a smaller group, could be one-on-one or just a few folks. And I like to have that interaction without a set agenda. And I love running into people either at the water cooler or the coffee station, or just cruising by as one or the other of us is having lunch, or in the food line, or going on a sales call with them, and not the sales meeting itself, but spending time with them either in the store or just kind of chatting and talking. You might have heard me talk earlier a little bit about the necessity of getting to the truth. And if people get too worked up about title or an aura or a presence, it's very, very hard to get that. So from the communication style, for me, it's always listen first and get to know first, and try to get it so that that's truthful. It's not that people lying to you or that they don't want to be truthful. It's just hard to not edit. You need to just sort of recognize that. So that allows me to listen and to absorb. And then in terms of communication style out, I like that same setting again, and it's really effective. It's extremely effective if you've only got 3 people in the company, because that's the only way that you're going to communicate, and that you need to. You've got a small group and you've got everybody covered. It doesn't work so well when you have more than 1,000 people working for you around the world. And I'm much worse. I'm not very good at applying the discipline to corporate communication, and using a media very much like the one that we're doing right this second to get the communication points out. And I mentioned Mark Reynoso, the current president of Belkin. He's done a much, much better job about bringing process and procedure to corporate communication to make sure that we are communicating in a much, much more effective way. So things are different, and falls under the category of you do what it is you got to do. But for me, and I enjoy the personal connection even with the public speaking and that type of thing if it's a larger group, but I like some feeling of connectivity, maybe that part's in my blood, with the people that are there. And that would hold true for every stakeholder to Belkin. But the way that we've had to evolve our communication is different, because it's what the organization needs. But I like to be able just to sit and chat. Boy, that's a huge deal for us. And I didn't understand an element of the culture that had developed at Belkin. I dropped out of UCLA, and so have no formal degree whatsoever. And there were a fair number of people that were involved in the early years of Belkin who by coincidence or subconscious design, it certainly wasn't conscious, also didn't have formal degrees from a college. So as that started to evolve in the workspace, and we started to have the very positive impact from the first few MBAs coming to work at Belkin, I was having just one of these casual sort of chats with this one person, and was talking to him about how much that I valued the insight that he was bringing to the organization, and the sort of resources that he used, and some of the tools and very effective, proven practices that he was bringing into the organization, just how much I valued that, and how much that I liked that. And he expressed his appreciation for that level of awareness, was pleasantly surprised that I was paying that much attention to it. And then when I got around to the question of, how can we make this place a better place to work for you and more effective for us, he said, talking to you has been really helpful to me, because it's clear to me how much you value the asset that I bring to this organization, including the time, energy, and financial investment that I've made into bettering myself and bettering this organization through me attaining my MBA. But culturally, I don't get that feeling. I didn't get it from you, Chet, for this dialogue, and I don't get it from people. It's like it's almost a badge of honor to have not received your undergraduate degree, and maybe even a further step back if you have your MBA. And those comments hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was both very grateful that I had gotten to the truth. It's not an easy thing for people to talk to you about, right? And really good example of how important getting to the truth is. Really said we really needed to change the culture of the organization. And this is something that was indicative only of Belkin. I mean, you certainly wouldn't get it at a private equity firm where it's all MBA holders in the first place, right? So it's something that's recognized and valued, and they don't even need to think about it. So we changed the culture of the organization and to evolve that, really recognizing, again, diversity in the workplace, experiences, talents, education, specifically the advantages that having an MBA brings. And it's something that accelerated. I used to keep count of how many MBAs we had in the organization. I've long lost count. And it was something that we celebrated every time that we brought one on, and now we bring one on more often than I'm not. But for us, it's been, and in many times, people that have gotten real life experience and have gone back to get their MBA. So a very powerful combination of real life practical experience with the freshest insights on what's working and how to make things work, and bringing that knowledge, that insight, and that expertise and injecting it into the organization. And then it's like a virus. It quickly spreads throughout the entire global marketplace. And the emphasis for us now is not just people with MBAs, but MBAs with a focus on international and global. And we want people to get the global thing. And we touched on this a little bit, but we're going to be targeting folks that have got some exposure to things that are green and help to make this world a more sustainable one. For me, that's an easy one and not an uncommon answer from a lot of people. It is absolutely my mom and my dad. And I would not want to replicate everything from either one of them. But the way in which they approached life and what they made happen with what they had really set a terrific example for me. And I hope that I've done half as good a job in providing some perspective, insight, and inspiration to my kids that my mom and dad did for me. But it's from both of them that I acquired the trait of there's something that you want to do, for heaven's sakes, go out and make it happen and don't let anything stop you. Well, the biggest goal to me as a person has always been to provide an environment for my family and for my kids. They'd grow up to be in space where they found themselves to be healthy and developed in body, mind, spirit, and emotional state. And there's nothing that's ever been more important to that than that to me. Secondly would be that I'm doing what it is that I love to do and that it is that I want to do, being self-aware as to what that is and being true to myself. And then specifically what that has meant, at a young age, I wanted to build an organization that started with nothing and scaled to an enterprise doing more than $1 billion a year, and that box is checked. Another key one for me is giving back and helping to repair the world and doing the right thing for people, and very active in nonprofits and schools on a global basis, and it's something that I do because I feel a need to do it. And for those of you involved in nonprofit work, I suspect that you're also aware that no matter how much you give, you always seem to get some exponential rate of return. Never a desire or motivation, it just happens. As some of those boxes have been checked or partially checked, where I'm at now is continuing the motivation of creating an environment of Belkin where people are able to achieve their full potential and to make great things happen. And I'm getting a large sense of fulfillment out of watching that take place in real time. So I think it's important to be aware of what is important to you and to be really true to that, and whether you do it formally or not, to measure your success versus that metric as well. You know, there's a lot of great books out there and a lot of great authors, and this is a question that comes up for me relatively often. And some of the books that I talk about catch people by surprise a little bit. A book that I've been talking about for a long time, but a great business book to read, is The Lorax by Theodore Geisel, or Dr. Seuss. And the story of the Lorax is this story about the environment and this entrepreneur. And it's a kid's book, right? But brilliantly written, and you're going to get it really quick. So if you happen to have kids or you know of kids, just read the story of the Lorax to them, and you'll pick up a little bit along the way from it as well. Horton Hatches an Egg is another great one. It's all about responsibility and commitment, and that the return on investment comes from those who have invested the time and the dedication and the commitment, and doesn't use the word entitlement in there, but you know, as you read that book again, if you haven't read it already, you know, really insightful stuff. Same author, Dr. Seuss again. I had trouble in getting to Sola Salou. All about having a goal in mind, not falling into the trap that your problems and troubles are somebody else's responsibility, they're yours, and what are you going to do about them? And several other Dr. Seuss books as well. So I know that that's an unconventional answer, but I would encourage you to spend a little bit of time with some of them. And then I've been influenced with the ones that you've already read or that get discussed all the time. The stuff that Jack Welch has written about General Electric has been really impactful on me. This is going back quite some time, but a book or two that was written by Lee Iacocca. I get a lot of inspiration and insight out of reading the writings of Warren Buffett, both in his annual letters and books that have been written about him. Good to Great is a great one, and The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you know, but with those, I'm telling you stuff you already know. With those first ones, those might be ones you haven't heard referenced before. Absolutely, positively, proudest achievement is to do with family and watching the girl that we've raised and the 6 boys develop in their own lives and playing a small part in what is going on with them. Really proud of the work that I've done with nonprofit organizations. And a contender for the things that make me most proud is creating an organization that allows people to develop and to achieve what they want to do from a corporate workplace space. And having played a role in creating an organization and an environment where people can make great things happen, and they're enabled and empowered, is absolutely one of the things that I'm the most proud of. Boy, I'm not sure that I would. I could rattle off 100 things that in that particular instant or with the aftermath of what was taking place there, where it was an error of commission or omission on my part or the organization's part, that I'd like to have those things to do over again, that we could do them in a much, much better way. But I'm so pleased with the total holistic process and where I am and where we're at. I think I'd probably hesitate messing with or meddling with any one of those things because I don't know what other sort of ramifications that it might have had on the total. So I think looking at it holistically, I don't think I'd change a thing because I'm really pleased with what it is that we've done, generally speaking, where it is we're at, and extremely excited about where it is that we're headed. And I wouldn't want to put any of those things at risk. I'm pleased. So given the chance, I probably wouldn't change anything. What has happened as part of the process is you get experience, you learn, and you evolve about the specific things that you wouldn't do that way again, right? And if you were to remove all of those kinds of things, you wouldn't gain those experience sets, and you wouldn't be tested, and your decision for the next larger ramification would be affected, probably in an adverse way. I've shared that I've got quite a few kids, and one of the most painful things to go through is, as a parent, having a kid experience pain. Our oldest son was putting his hands in a VCR play deck and had like a flap cover on it. So he stuck his hand in there, and then when he went to take his hand out, the cover would pinch his fingers into his skin. It caused him pain. He wanted his hand out worse. So he'd panic or frantically, really trying to get his hand out of there. Of course, the harder that he pulled, the deeper the impression. And so I came down, I saw it, I felt bad that he'd been exposed to this, and the poor guy was like wiping his hand on the carpet. You know, he's trying to wipe the pain off. And I felt so bad. And as I thought about it, I said, you know, all of us need those painful experiences to take place. It's how we learn. And if you were to take away every painful experience from a kid, their ability to grow and mature in a healthy, emotional way wouldn't happen, and they wouldn't be prepared. And I think that same example and sample can be used for organizations and all of us as leaders and managers for those organizations.